welcome to my YouTube channel and blog. This is Jenny Hall. Thanks for joining me for another card making tutorial. Today I'm making a fun and whimsical card using Tasty Trucks stamp set, watercolor paper, watercolor pencils, and an embossing folder. I'm using this stamp set because it is kind of not really a male and not really a female. It's just a fun card. I'll be using thick whisper white cardstock for my card base, and it measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And for your reference, all of the other card size measurements are in the video description or listed up in the right hand corner of the screen throughout the video. To do the stamping today, I'm using StazOn black ink, and I'm stamping onto watercolor paper. The StazOn black ink is like, I don't know what to compare it to other than like a Sharpie marker. Once you put a Sharpie marker on some things, it's there for lifetime. So that's the way I feel about this StazOn. The only advice that I have with using StazOn is to be very careful with this care of your stamps, that you do have to use a special cleaner that's made just for StazOn, and then after you use a StazOn cleaner, then you'll need to clean and condition your stamps with your normal method of cleaning up, which would be Stampin' Mist or maybe a baby wipe or something, but just to kind of lock it in the back of your mind as a tip. I'm using just a small amount of the watercolor pencils. I want to keep the colors down to just these 6 colors, and I'll be doing some blending on the colors. I chose to use for the side panel old olive cardstock because there is old olive color in this assortment of pencils. It is disappointing that I don't have all of the rest of the Stampin' Up color family to be able to use at my disposal, but what I can do is create brand new colors by mixing a couple of pencils, and then I've got something new to work with. And that makes it nice whenever I see projects out there and I've got all new colors. So it's just something maybe you might want to try to do in your crafting. I'm using the brown to color down onto the card, and there is a very, very light touch that I'm using. If you were to use more pressure and put a more concentrated amount of pencil down in one area, then whenever you choose to bring your blender pen or your water brush over, then it's going to give you definitely a higher concentration of color in that one area. What I try to do is give it a natural shading, and then I try to keep, whenever I concentrate the pencil into an area, then I want to mentally give myself that message that I have a darker or a shaded area that I want to keep that concentration of color to. This is a black pencil, and I'm going around a couple of different outlined images just to give a little bit of shading, and that way it's going to bring out the other colors that I'm using for the card. The brown truck is definitely not extremely attractive, but I would say that my oldest son helped to pick out the colors for this project, and he likes to call this a cupcake truck. So it may not be the most attractive truck, but to me it's a little bit special because this is the way my son helped me to pick out all the colors to use for this project. I stacked up a few little cupcakes in the window of the truck, and I'm just going over them with some pink frosting, and that's for a contrast to the green cardstock panel that will be on the front of the card. To color in the window areas of the truck, I'm using a very light coating of blue that is going to emulate what it looks like for like panes of glass on the truck. Whenever I look at glass, I don't see a color that's a solid color, and I definitely don't see that it's clear. There's just a little bit of a residual color. And I want to apologize for the background noise in this video. I have a house full today, and my children are having a really great time with a lot of family members. I'm using the water brush to mix up the colors, and in some areas I want those colors to blend, and in some areas I want them to kind of stand alone. On the pennants, I used a pink pencil, and then I used yellow, I think it was, to go back in and kind of like they're two-toned. And then once this mixes together, then what I was trying to achieve is just a different look of, like, as if the light were going to catch all of the little triangles from that string of pennants. They're not going to all be the same color whenever the light hits them. So I used the two different pencils, and I muddled the paints together just enough to where everything got melted, but the colors did not completely run into each other to make that new color. There's still a differential between the pink and the yellow together. Here's this brown truck, and I think of the UPS guy that brings my Stampin' Up packages every time I look at this brown truck. And I think I'm always happy whenever UPS comes because that's Happy Mail. And so here's this brown truck carrying cupcakes, and I'm using strokes that are just going in a back and forth motion because I don't want to move the water brush in a lot like in a circular motion, because whenever you do melt those pencils, then oftentimes whatever motion you're using, it will translate out into the paper that you're muddling. Once, and I didn't do this on camera, I did it afterward, but you will see it in the photos that are following the video. After the panes of glass were dry, I took some of the fine tip glue pen and I gave a light coating of what would be shiny stuff on top of the glass of the two areas that are closest to the front of the truck, so that if you turn the card itself to catch the light, then you will see clearly that those two front windows look like they're glass because they're shiny and see-through. And I did the same thing on the hubcaps for the truck, and I did it for the little triangle pieces on the pennant and the headlight on the very front. I used the black pencil instead of the gray pencil on this project because normally I would use gray. I'm not so much of a strong black presence on some of the color contrast, but what it does was, with a light touch, I was able to get that gray color, and I was able to limit the number of colors that are going into my project. That way everything would correspond just a little better. I just choose to use the brick wall as an embossing folder because to me this card is kind of urban looking, and I don't really expect to see a cupcake truck or a taco truck or a hot dog truck in the country or or in the suburbs very much, but it is something that to me I would expect to see in an urban area. So I used something that would give a little bit of texture and draw the eye around. And out of all the embossing folders that I have, the brick wall is the one that is like the most unassuming, meaning that I can use it in more projects in more versatile ways, and it doesn't look like it just belongs on one certain kind of a card. And so the brick wall has become one of my favorite embossing folders. I embossed the sentiment onto black cardstock using white embossing powder, and I heat set it with my heat gun, and I used a embossing buddy first on the paper to make sure that there were no oils from my hand that would stick to the embossing powder. Especially with black cardstock, once the powder gets heat set, then there is no going back on that project. You're going to have little white sprinkles. So I'm very careful to make sure that I use a paintbrush to get the stray pieces up and out of the way. To adhere the pieces together, I'm using the snail adhesive, and that's a tape runner from Stampin' Up. I'm just using a generous amount of it. Oftentimes, whenever I use watercolor paper, I will use a fast fuse instead of snail adhesive. But I just wanted to use what I had on hand, and so I gave it a really generous amount of snail adhesive. And to bring this as the focal piece away from the rest of the card project, then I'm using some Stampin' Dimensionals, which are double-sided foam dimensionals, and that gives it a raised look and sets this area apart from the rest of the card. The green brick wall is adhered straight down to the card base so that it will definitely set the focal point apart. To give a little interest for this card, I am using the sprinkles embellishments that are from the 2017 Occasions catalog, and these are the very coolest sequins that I have ever seen from Stampin' Up. There are little squares, there are cone-shaped, little orange and kind of like an orangey yellow color, and there's little pearls. There is a lot of variety in this packet, and there is a lot of them, period. So we're going to be using them on quite a few projects, and I like how they are out of the ordinary. What I did with the sentiment is I'm adding a piece of white baker's twine with a bow just to kind of set it apart from the focal image, and I cut a fishtail banner on it to make it appear like it would echo the pennants on the truck. Thank you guys for joining me for another card making tutorial. I invite you to go over to my blog at jennystampsup for more card making inspiration.
Thanks for watching the video. See you next time.